Today we're going to do the metric measurement mass lab. I've got this worksheet packet attached on Canvas for you, so you can go through and read. I'm not going to read through the introduction. I'm going to go through and do all the lab procedures for you. You guys that are quarantined at home like me. So the first thing that it says to do, it says before you begin, be sure that the riders are moved all the way to the left and that the pointer rests on 0 on your balance. And so I've got a triple beam balance here. And you can see, if I can get in there close enough, that the pointer points at 0, and then all the riders over here are pointing at 0. So then it says to place the coin on the pan of the balance. So we're going to take a coin, put it on the pan, and we want to mass it. All right, and you can see obviously that pointer is not on 0. So I'm going to start. It says to always start with the largest rider. I know this isn't going to be 100 grams, but I'm going to go ahead and move it over to show you. And see, now it's way below the pointer, so that's way too much. So then I'm going to move the next one. If I move it to 10, that's still too much. So all that I really need to move here is the smallest rider. And so if I move it over, a little bit more, back just a touch. It looks to me like it's about 2.5, and we always go one place beyond what the scale gives us. So I'm going to call that 2.55. So the mass of the penny is 2.55 grams. So then we're going to move all this back. It then tells us they want to know the mass of the paper clip. So it's still at 0. The rider's still at 0, so I'm going to grab the paper clip out of here, put it on the pan, and we'll go through the same process. If I move the 100-gram rider, it's way too much. If I move the 10-gram rider, it's also going to be way too much. So I know that it's got to be less than 10 grams, so I'm going to move the small rider. And it looks to me like it's about 0.8, and we're going to go one place beyond that. I would say it's a little bit to the right of 0.8, so I'm going to call it 0.82 grams. And then the next thing it tells you to do is to mass the rubber stopper. So I'm going to take the rubber stopper, move all the riders back to 0, put the rubber stopper on, and I'm going to do the same thing. So it's less than 100 grams. Go back, move the rider over to 10. It's more than 10. It's more than 20, but it's less than 30. So I'm going to move it back to the 20, and I'm going to move the smallest rider. It looks to me like it's 20, a little bit over 20, so 20 point, almost 0.6. So I'm going to call it 20.59 grams. So I'm going to take that off and I'm going to clear the riders. The next thing that it says to do, if you can read it here, it says find the mass of an empty 250 milliliter beaker and record the mass in data table number 2. Okay, so I've got an empty 250 milliliter beaker. I'm going to put it on here. Again, all my riders are at 0. And let's figure out what the mass of it is. So if I move it to 100, it's over 100. If I move it to 200, it's less than 200. So now I'm going to move the 10s, so it's more than 110, but less than 120. So we'll move it back to 110. And then we're going to move the smallest rider. That looks pretty good right there. So it's 110, 111.1. I would say it's in between the 0.1 and 0.2. So we're going to call it 111.15 grams. And if we read on, it says using the graduated cylinder, obtain 50 milliliters of water. So we've got a graduated cylinder over here. Okay, and so I'm going to go to the sink, turn on the water and try to get $50 milliliters. Sometimes it's hard to do with, that's pretty close, without setting it on a flat surface. And so now we're going to add this 50 milliliters of water to this. So I haven't reset the riders yet. I know it's going to be more than 100. I know that it's going to be more than 110. So I'm going to reset that one. I don't think it's going to be 200, but we can try. Yeah, it's less than 200. So we know it's more than 110. And I would say it's a little bit less than 160. Well, maybe it is 160. So that looks pretty close to being on the pointer. So it's 150 plus 10 exactly. So I'm going to call it 160, and we want to go one place beyond what the scale gives you. This gives you the tenths place, so 160.0. And we're going to call it 160.00. And so we're done with the water. So I'm going to take this over and dump it down the drain. And then it says, place a piece of weighing paper on the balance pan and find its mass and record the mass in data table number 3. So for the weighing paper, this is what we're going to use. So I need to re-zero the balance, just like that. Put the weighing paper on. For some reason it's off of, it needs to be calibrated again. So there's a little knob here on the end. For some reason this isn't pointing exactly at 0. So I'm going to turn the knob until it is pointing at 0. And that's pretty close. So then I'm going to put the weighing paper on. And we're going to determine the mass of the weighing paper. Even though it's not paper, it's plastic. It's going to be reusable weighing paper for us, so we don't have to throw it away every time. And you can see that the weighing paper, I knew it wasn't going to be 100 grams, so I didn't even go that high. But it looks to me like it's about it's almost 2.9. I'm going to call it 2.88 grams. And then we read on further. It says add exactly 5 grams to the value of the mass on the weighing paper and move the writers to this number. So if we add exactly 5 grams to this, it's going to be 5 plus 2.88 is 7.88. So I'm going to move the writers to 7.88. That's very close there. I get it to stay, okay? It says obtain a sample of table salt from your teacher. You've got table salt right here on the table. Table salt is NaCl, which we'll get into the name of that later. That's why it says NaCl on here. Using the scoop, add a small amount of salt at a time to the paper on the balance until the pointer rests on 0, and then dispose of the table salt in the container provided by your teacher. So since we're just going to reuse this table salt every class period, you're just going to put the table salt back in the container. So let me get my camera set up here. So that you can see. So we're going to use a scoopula. And all we want is for this pointer to point to 0, because we know the mass of this is 2.88. We added 5 grams to it, and so when this points at 0, then we know we have 5 grams of table salt. So I'm just going to add it. Hopefully I don't have to take any back out, but if I do, that's simple enough. And it looks like I've got a little bit more than 5 grams, so take a little bit out, a little bit more out. Maybe it's easier to dump it out. Okay, so that's 5 grams of table salt. So now all we need to do, that's really all that it tells you to do in the lab. You've got a table that you need to fill in with all those masses, some conclusion questions you'll need to answer in your comp book, and some critical thinking and application questions in your comp book too. Don't worry about the going further. So I'm just going to take this, pour it back into the salt container for the next class period, put the lid back on, and put the stopper, the penny, and the paper clip back in a plastic container so they don't disappear. And then I'm going to re-zero the balance. Okay, that's it.